Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We're glad that you're here. We do have a lot of content to get through today, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Erica. I'm on the communities team here at VMUG, and I work with virtual programming as well. If this is your first VMUG event, welcome. VMware User Group is an independent global customer-led organization created to maximize members' use of VMware and partner solutions through knowledge sharing, training, collaboration, and events like this one. A little bit of housekeeping for today. You can get connected to a local VMUG community near you at my.vmug.com. Please use the Q&A function for all questions to the panelists today. They will be able to answer these live and in the question box throughout the webcast. Things can get lost in the chat, so let's use the Q&A. And then this session is being recorded, and the recording will be distributed in a wrap-up email after the webcast, as well as posted to the VMUG YouTube. You can find all future webcasts, VMUG webcasts here on the left, and then you can register for the remaining series on the right. This is part 2 of a 4-part series about VCF 9. And so make sure to register for the rest of them, including a panel at the end of the month. And then find another VMUG event near you. We'll be at the Explore on tours, including the ones happening this week. And then we have some VMUG user cons coming up as well. And then be sure to join for the virtual event on November 6th. And with that, I'll pass it over to John and Christopher. We're glad to have you on.
Excellent. And recording has already started, right?
Yeah, we are good.
Perfect. You guys can see my screen, I hope. In the meantime, I'm going to pull up the Q&A part here, and we're going to get rock and rolling with a little introduction. Hello, my name is Christopher Kusek, Principal Architect at VCF, VMware, Broadcom, and I'm joined today by John Schulz. John, your amazing intro.
It is amazing, Christopher. Yeah, this is John Schulz, and I'm glad to be here. I am focused on ops and automation these days. Been with VMware for about 20 years, so glad
Is
to be
it
here.
John Schulz from johnschulz.com?
That is
A
John
blog,
Schulz.
which I will be referring to several times later. All right, so today we're going to talk about VCF 9 Demystified, upgrades, myths, migration paths. So there's a lot of fun here. Definitely leverage that Q&A. Hey, Erica just mentioned something about, you can go there, go to that URL, go to that QR code to access last week's recording, to access this week's recording after today, and to register for parts 3 and 4. Also, I'll do a little plug for my 2-hour AMA with experts next month. It should be an amazing session. And of course, you can always go subscribe at my newsletter in case you want to, for various updates on all of the things. We're going to kick into some things today. We're going to talk about an overview of the paths to get to VCF 9, some upgrade paths, some complexities, and some takeaways. And we're going to be sprinkling in demos and lots of other fun stuff throughout. So let me go find where my cursor is. So overview paths. Let's cover on some of these things, right? So basically, it's broken up into 3 main categories, right? Deploy VCF 9, brand new. This is greenfield, right? That is just a solid, hey, deploy a greenfield and start migrating your workloads over to that environment. Upgrade or converge is often the nomenclature we'll see throughout. Upgrade your environment to VCF 9. So take something that already exists that's running vSphere 8 and then upgrade it across. Or upgrading an existing VCF environment. So that's like a 5.2 environment. And by a 5.2, it says like VCF 5.x. It's a 5.2 environment. So if you're running 5, you go to 5.1, 5.2, 9, right? If you're running 5.1, you go to 5.1, 5.2, 9. But we'll kind of get into the meat on that a little bit. This is important. I literally just said that, right? If you're running older VCFs, you go 3 to 4 to 5 to 5.2 to 9, right? If you're running older vSphere 7, and earlier, you get that stuff up to a supported version of 8, and you take it above. A couple caveats here. Oh, I'm running VxRail. Look to Dell for guidance and direction on how you have to operate in that environment. Hey, I'm running vCloud Director. Ooh, John, maybe John will want to talk about that at some point. There are provisions of the elements. If someone that applies to someone, drop in the Q&A, say, hey, I'm a vCloud Director shop. We can kind of address some of the nuances there. VxRail does support Greenfield. I will note that Dell released a KB recently on that, so just kind of touch on that. Dell does support Greenfield, and maybe in the future they will support Brownfield, but today, purely Greenfield on all these elements. So, John, Why don't you take us through some of these paths to building a VCF 9 environment? If you want to. If you're off mute. Are you muted? Are you double muted? Your mouth is moving, but your lips are, there's no words.
All right, let's see. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I'm loving it.
All right, we're flying the plane as we're building it, so to speak. Let's say, huh? All right, let me get to a situation with my audio. There we go. Now we're looking good. All right, so let's talk through some technical difficulties there, but let's proceed now. So paths to VCF 9. Obviously, the first one is to deploy a new install, greenfield. Very easy to do. We'll talk about how to do that. The next one is a convergence, or bringing your existing installation into to VCF and VCF as a management domain, and then proceeding from there. And then finally, Christopher, you mentioned this one just then, upgrading an existing vSphere environment, updating the individual components to 9, and then pulling those in potentially. There are other ways to bring in workload domains that are, let's say, 8.0 update 3, pulling those into your VCF 9 ops environment, and then upgrading from there. So a couple different ways to tackle this. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide.
Absolutely. Look at that. That worked.
There we go. All right. We got all the issues out of the way, hopefully. So next, you might be familiar with the Cloud Builder in the past. We're moving to a new appliance, optimized and streamlined, called the VCF Installer. And we actually can take a look at that appliance later on, if that makes sense. But that is what we're going to leverage to deploy a new VCF instance, or to bring components that you have into a VCF instance. Operations is a key component in this whole thing. That is going to help us license the environment. It's going to help us build consistent infrastructure with config drifts and with images and that type of thing. And then the workload domain deployment, it's going to offer some flexibility that we haven't had in the past, but that we're adding now to VCF 9. And the idea is to help us to create a consistent environment that's easy to maintain and to manage and to upgrade and automate.
Yeah, so much flexibility. Speaking of the VCF installer, hey, there you go. And yeah, absolutely. We'll look at some slides that show it, but then John's going to really show it to us.
Yeah, we can definitely go through it. When you install the VCF installer, it's a pretty slim binary. One of the first things you'll do is go out and you'll connect to a repo and pull the rest of the binaries that are required for the install down, and then get going. And then we'll talk about installing from either the wizard that's there in the appliance, or from a JSON. If you have something that you want to roll with there, you can do that as well. It does a lot of pre-checks for things like NTP, for instance, or to make sure that you have all of your DNS entries in and correct, and those are resolving. So ideally, it's going to help the rollout to be smooth and be consistent, and to get you to an end state fairly easily.
Are you saying NTP and DNS being set correctly are important?
Those are usually the two things that break my environment. Yep.
And I know we deal with VCF every day, but the VCF installer is also the VVF installer. Is that a fair point, John?
That is a fair point and a good reminder. Yes, the installer can be used to do the VCF install or VVF for those customers that have VBF as well. Very good point.
When people want to do something especially custom, often through the lens of NSX in some cases, that's where using the JSON spec actually comes in handy in some of those cases, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, excuse me. So next, we're talking about converging existing infrastructure into a VCF 9 environment. And this really is bringing existing components that you've got today, upgrading them to VCF 9 to bring them into spec with the requirements, and then importing them, bringing them into a VCF environment. And that first environment that you bring in is going to become your management domain. And then you're going to move from there. As you can see, there's some requirements here to hit. The components must be running vSphere version 9 in this case in order to be brought in. Yep. We also are going to be using VLCM images for all clusters as opposed to VUM in the past.
Yeah, I know we're going to hit on that multiple times throughout, but
Yep.
we're strictly hitting on it right now. There's a lot
Yep.
of reiteration of points because we want to drive home some of those really important elements, whether you're upgrading, converging, importing, greenfielding, etc. Brownfield.
Right. That VDS point there too, Christopher, is one that, might affect some customers that are still on standard switches. Not many out there, but there are some. And there are some optimizations, obviously, for VDS. But that's going to be a requirement in bringing those workloads in and converging them into a VCF environment.
And that general guidance, maybe I shouldn't run my infrastructure on DHCP. Maybe you should not, right? As part of the VM kernel IPs must be statically assigned, right?
Yeah. Hopefully you're not doing that today, but yeah, definitely. We'll check to make sure that's not the case.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then,
Helm.
yeah, just a note down there at the bottom, enhanced link mode. That's something that needs to be disabled. However, there's the new and improved vCenter linking, which we'll actually see in my environment in the demo as we move forward. But that vCenter linking is there, and it's a replacement, new and improved feature there that provides very similar functionality. The NSX registration, we cannot converge currently.
Cannot converge an existing and exactly. And we'll talk about there are some cases where NSX, there was comments about NSX Federation, stuff like that. There's comments about where there's elements where NSX can be leveraged, but in the initial release of 9.0, there's special nuances to what you can and cannot do in that case.
Right.
Yeah, which we'll touch on those points when we get to those elements. But from a converging existing vSphere in this particular notes here, this is kind of those requirements. Now, John, there are some fleet level requirements that you need to kind of deal with, right?
There are some fleet level requirements, and I believe we have a slide there. There we go.
There we go. That slide.
Yeah, you're one step ahead here, so that's good. So when we're adding into the fleet, we must upgrade all the components, like we said, to get to version 9. We're going to need to upgrade ARIA operations. I think there's a question potentially around that. So one of the key components about bringing operations into the mix here is that we need to get it up to version 9. And that's going to be important in most all environments, again, because of licensing. And Christopher will talk about that throughout this. But we've got to update that operations component to 9 in order to get that awareness and allow lifecycle management to happen as we move through there. Yeah, actually, I think operations has to be 8.18 patch 2. I think is
ops should be 8.18.3, but LCM has to be 8.18.2 in a minimum. Although with 8.18.3 that came out, and people are like, oh, it should be 8.18.3. Yeah, but 8.18.2 was that universal minimum requirement for taking LCM and turning it into Fleet Manager, right?
Right. We should be on 8.18.3 anyway for security reasons, but
it was actually not LCM turns into Fleet Manager. It was the VCF installer turns into Fleet Manager. Is that right? Is that a right interpretation, John?
That's right. We still have there's still some streamlining to do. So there is an SDDC manager that manages some of the underlying components as well as Fleet Manager.
Headless now, so
which is headless.
Does become a headless component. Yeah.
Right. So we are converging those into fewer panes of glass, so to speak, but shooting for the single pane, or the single glass of pain, as I like to say.
Yeah.
All right.
House of pain. You want to talk VIDM, VIDB for a second? I mean,
yeah,
I will, but if you want to.
Sure. Well, there are a couple things I'd like to mention. One, the ARIA logs. Today, there's no upgrade path from where you are today. Yeah, there we go. There it is, right there on the slide.
There.
That's something that's important. And if you've got a logs installation, there are ways to migrate some of your logs to 9 or transfer them to 9, but there's not a direct migration path there. So that just needs to be part of your planning as you move through this process.
Yeah, and for logs, typically and universally, the way we've all kind of treated is either use the migration steps to copy those logs over, import them into the new platform, or just keep it around until they age out and move all the stuff across so you can keep it around for, archival compliance reasons. But if you have anything there that's really, really long-term duration, let us know and we can revisit that part of it.
Yeah.
There's nuance needed in those requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Just check your retention period, and as long as we're planning for that scenario, we're all good. But yeah, to the VIDM point, that is being replaced with the new and improved VIDB, or the broker that'll be appearing in VCF 9, and that's going to be important for us to move to that more flexible, more highly available broker that's going to provide some more functionality for us.
And today, VIDM is something you normally were deploying if you're doing automation or you're doing VRA, because that's when the terms of the time. You're doing VRA, you're doing Horizon. That's where you typically have VIDM. But going forward in 9, VIDB, at least in the release of 9.0, VIDB initially comes embedded in vCenter. And you can use fleet management to deploy a multi-node or 3-node instance of VIDB. So you're not maintaining the embedded instance of it. So you've got some flexibility to make it, instantly available or highly available is kind of the way I would look at it.
Right. Yeah. And there are some scenarios where VIDB and that architecture becomes important. For instance, with the VCFA, where we have multi-tenants, we can actually have a VIDB cluster for each tenant so that they can have their own identity provider. We can go into more depth on that, but there are some additional flexibility options for VIDB.
All right, let's pop over to, okay. So this is a part for converging an existing infrastructure to become your first management domain. John, you've got a lot of experience doing this, and some of the, especially when it comes to these checkboxes themselves, right? These checkboxes are optional. They're not radio buttons, right? It is I use something I already have, or instantiate and deploy something for me. Is that, fair?
Right, that's fair. And this, I believe, again, I think there's a question out there that's addressing this about leveraging existing components to bring those into the management domain for my fleet. And so, as you can see here, we can bring in existing components as long as they're patched and ready to roll. And VCF operations is one of those, as well as an existing vCenter too. So,
well, and these bullets kind of call out vSphere, vCenter, ESX, vSAN, check. Operations, check. Automation, check. And as you mentioned on that last part, is logs? No, logs was in. No, we're not doing logs. Not mentioned on here, network operations, network insight, Verni, check.
Yep.
You can actually integrate that one, and it'll take that 6.4, I think it was, and actually update it into 9. So you've got all those pieces. You take your VLCM, not referenced in here, but VLCM then gets integrated into it. Your SDDC manager, becomes integrated as a headless SDDCM. But we'll note this little part here. The VCF installer converges. It takes something that exists and brings it in. But if I want to import something, I use VROPs. I use VCF operations to do that import of that environment in, which John's going to be able to show here in a moment. I'd say we'll touch this and then we'll kind of roll into some of the fun there where you actually go in demo time, right?
Okay.
One of the key parts of this session is titled around myths, right? The number one myth, hands down, the absolute number one myth I hear is VCF requires vSAN. And VCF 5.2 requires vSAN. I agree. 5.2, 5.1, 5.0, 4.0, etc. Yes. VCF 9.0, no vSAN requirement. It can be vSAN, NFS. Okay. All right. So let's look at here. The management domain requires either vSAN, NFS, or fiber channel, right? Instantiating a new instance, right? And then we've got some other options of flexibility here. I will go through the next couple of slides just to show some of the benefits and nuance of each of those pieces of it, right? So, there is a benefit to vSAN HCI or vSAN storage clusters. If you guys remember the vSAN Max, that's the vSAN storage clusters. And then there's some extra functionality and flexibility mentioned on, hey, if I'm doing fiber channel, if I'm doing NFS. But I I dug these slides up specifically to share with you guys as to what the different cases of these things happen to be, what different distributed switch models, what some of the different capabilities on it before we go into heavy demo time with John here. So it's like NFS, you'll know NFS v3 principle, absolutely my management domain, my workload domain, no problem. But if I want to do NFS v4, it is supplemental because it's something that has to be done after. Because NFS v4 configuration is something done after the fact as opposed to initial instantiation from a standard deployment, right? So, and giving you a sense of different type of cluster models, different type of data store cluster configurations and stuff like that. You know, how you manage your connections and stuff like that. There's a lot of power here. And the same kind of thing inside of fiber channel principal or supplemental and kind of supporting that infrastructure and all the pieces that go into it. I'm going to pull up this slide just to have it there for a moment. And then John, you're going to take over and go into demo time, and then we'll come back to this so you can talk all about the simple versus HA deployments, and I can go look at Q&A.
All right, perfect. All right, let me see if I can.
Let me see if I can hit stop share. I love it.
And I'm gonna. Well, it's looks like we got a couple extra things showing up there. Okay, can you see my VCF Ops 9 install?
I think I can.
Sweet. All right. And you can probably see Brock Peterson's dashboard here. This is my home screen that we've got. All right. So Christopher, when we go to show some of these demos, what are some of the areas that we want to focus on here to really show off?
Well, in this case, we're talking about installer, we're talking about import, we're talking about upgrade, all that kind of nuance. So but I'll also look through the Q&A in case there's certain items that kind of stand out. But that would be the first place I would think to show off your chops on it, right?
Right. Yeah. So this is just a quick look at the new VCF Ops environment here, and you'll notice that we do have infrastructure operations here that are pretty much your typical traditional VCF Ops types of things. We do have fleet management here that we'll go into a little bit, and we have the ability to import existing environments. So you can see here, I've got some VCF instances here. I've got a management domain and a couple of workload domains. I do have a standalone vCenter that's imported here that I'm managing as well. But what Christopher was talking about there is the ability to import or add a workload domain to this existing environment. And so what I can do is I can either create a new workload domain, or I can actually go and import a vCenter that I've got out there. Let's just say I'm going to call it workload domain 04. And this is the wizard that I'm going to say, hey, wait, I'm going to specify an external vCenter, and I can go through and enter the information here. Christopher, I can do this, or we can just talk about it, whichever one you think makes sense. Let's see if I can type. It's just to show you exactly what this might look like. This is a typical environment. And see this vCenter, I'm going to say, hey, this one does not have NSX installed. And so as part of this process, on this import, I'm going to verify my thumbprints. It will actually do an NSX install for me so that it's there and ready to use. So it's going to run through some pre-checks here. Again, Christopher, these are the pre-checks to make sure that my NTP is functional and responding, that my DNS resolution is looking good, that I have VDS implementation handled. All of those requirements are going to be pre-checked here. So that's basically how you would import an environment. And so it looks like everything passed there. So that was
a success.
That's good.
What I do like about it is it does show you all the things it checks for. That's kind of a useful thing to, I mean, we talk about NTP and DNS, and there's a reason we talk about NTP and DNS. 99% of your problems, NTP and DNS, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So it's going to go through and run through all these checks and make sure everything is good. And then I am not going to go through the rest of this process, but this is just to show you how easy it is to import that existing vCenter, as long as it's at the proper version number. This one's an 8.0 update 3 version, actually, that we're bringing in as workload domain. And like I told you, it was going to go ahead and do that NSX install as part of the importing process there. So
And
we
you
can
can
either
choose that to be single or multi in that case, because they had that option to be single or multi. And the thing there is you go single, hey, you get your IP address ready. You go multi, get your IP addresses ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that you need to have set up there is part of the deployment is going to be your depot, so that we actually have those bits available to be installed. And so there's a couple things that we could potentially run over in that regard. And so with the SDDC manager that's going to manage the SDDC components, we would go in and set up a depot. We can either do an online depot where we're connecting directly to Broadcom, or we can do an offline depot. That's what I'm doing here. This is great for dark sites, or folks that don't have internet connectivity directly into the environment that they're facilitating here. We can use the VCF download tool to populate the offline depot, or we can very easily just connect to Broadcom with a token to get those bits down. And then we can go into binary management and take a look at those upgrade binaries that are available, patch binaries, or in the case that we're deploying a new workload domain, we would need some of the install binaries. And so these are downloaded, staged, and available for that process. So there you go, Christopher. There's adding a new workload domain by either creating a new one or importing an existing vCenter.
I'm loving it. I'm gonna go move this back to the other screen there. I got some questions answered, but bringing back, I'm excited for you to talk about this though.
Okay.
This being
the slide that you had staged.
This being this slide that we have staged.
Sometimes I don't know.
It's right. Well, it's the deployment model, right? It's the simple versus HA. It's the nuance on that. It's some of the, remember, this is all if things were in the smallest level of deployment. It's understanding the requirements on some of those. And also your recent discovery around NSX management and CPU, right?
Right. Yeah. So are you going to share that slide just so we have a slide to talk to, or we can just
Are you not seeing the slides being shown on screen?
I tell you what, if I click this other button right here, instead of looking at the two of us.
That's okay. I was looking at my slides instead of your demo before.
Oh, good. All right. So so this is a great slide to show the two different deployments in this case. They're obviously there's a spectrum in between, but the minimal deployment, the simple deployment, is going to show the required appliances there. We continue to reduce this and streamline the process, but this is where it is today with ops. We've got an ops collector. There's VCF automation. We can do a single instance there. vCenter, SDDC manager, NSX manager, and then our fleet manager appliance. So
ops, there's your collector, there's a little auto right there, some fleet management, all those kind of fun pieces, right?
Exactly. And then above that are deployed after the VCF install. So we talked about VIDB a little bit. That's an option to deploy, and I can show you that in the interface if you remind me.
VIDB is deployed in your vCenter, like we said before. VIDB is deployed embedded in your vCenter, and at which time you decide I want to deploy a highly available VIDB, and you'll note this one and this one are the same, right? But if you say I want to deploy a highly available VIDB, there's no migration path from your embedded vCenter VIDB configuration. So you have to go and set up that newly highly available deploy VIDB configuration stuff. So as far as that goes, so that's a fun one to know, because you're like, man, I deploy VIDB, but where's all my stuff? Like, you're gonna get your stuff once you go and you configure your stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, some of these are post install items. So yeah, and the NSX edges are deployed post install there. along with our logs implementation that we've talked about. And then we're showing VKS here. I always think that this is the supervisor service, and then we can add additional operators or components to that. VKS is definitely one of those that's very popular. That gets us a fully upstream Kubernetes install 60 days from the release of Kubernetes, which is handy. Yeah, and then on the right side, as we transition to more of an HA implementation, you can see the required appliances go up a little bit. And obviously this is not going to make sense for every deployment just because of the resources that are required. But this is certainly an option to provide that HA capability. And I foresee this being streamlined in the future, but this is how it is today, and provides you extremely highly available environment there. So
yeah, because we have an expectation, belief that in the future, more of these pieces will be combined into each other. Like today, SDC Manager is still a separate headless appliance. Fleet Management is still a separate, also headless appliance that's all fed by and controlled by operations. But maybe some of those pieces start getting combined and collapsed underneath the covers. The kind of functionality we've seen, to date, where ops became that central board for all different kinds of things, right?
Right. Yep.
Now,
exactly.
Talk to me about that NSX management thing you identified recently. The NSX CPU utilization
Well,
situation.
there was some fairly high CPU utilization on NSX. Is that what you were talking about?
I'm talking all about reservations, man. I am not reserved about that.
Oh yeah. So one thing that I did find,
and it's not a bad thing. This
it's
is
not a
a
bad
this is a
thing.
true. I highly discourage you to modify or disable what John's about to say, but I want you to know that it exists because it does, and I don't want you to after the fact go, let's go jury rig that, let's go Jimmy it around.
Yeah. So I found this by noticing in VCF ops that the CPU and memory consumption for some of the appliance didn't match what I was expecting, and then didn't match what I was seeing in vCenter. And so I discovered that some of the reservations, and specifically these were networking appliances that had the reservations for good reason, we definitely want those components to have the resources that they need in order to perform properly. But I noticed that the appliances had CPU reservation and memory reservations identified in vCenter. And so those reservations were showing up in ops as memory demand and CPU demand, which makes sense because they were reserved for that appliance. But I was able to go in and reduce those reservations because of the consumption in my environment. We went and carefully looked to make sure that we weren't reducing them beyond.
Don't do this in prod.
Don't do this in prod, but make sure that that those resources are being reserved for those appliances. So this is one way to make sure that your simple deployment is consuming the number of resources that you have available, and you could potentially skinny that up if you need to. But yeah. Is that what you were talking about, Christopher?
That is exactly what I'm talking about, which was like, wow. I mean, and it's not something you normally have eyes on because that networking component is often disconnected or separately within the environment, so you don't have the ability to control that. But while we've got a cap, right? Hey, we limit you to the ceiling, but also we have the ability, we can grow the scale, because I mean, NSX management node, that's a small node. I can make that a bigger node, but how often can I take my backing switch and like make it bigger easily, inexpensively? It's just typically not an option. So just being aware that some of that kind of functionality and like configuration to enforce your availability exists out there. So let's talk about a little bit about this workload domains, right? So everything up until this point, we're talking about those management domain, right? The management domain is where all of the thing exists, right? It's where your ops, your vCenters, your automation, your VIDB, all that kind of jazz exists inside that place. That's where all the main consumptive resources tend to exist in that place, right? But talk to me about workload domains a little bit, John. What is a workload domain exactly?
Well, a workload domain is a way to separate resources for a specific group or set of workloads or project. one way to do that. And it's also a way to create a standardized footprint. So it's easy to deploy, it's easy to manage, easy to update, all of those things. But the idea is to create a consistent workspace that that we can deploy. And it contains its own vCenter. It's going to contain potentially its own NSX installation. There's some flexibility there as to whether or not we have a single NSX manager.
So you're saying there's like a choice of an NSX network fabric, right?
Yeah, there's a choice. You can either have new or existing, but you can also you can also create a single NSX manager across workload domains or do a one-for-one. Again, it's probably going to come down to resources that you have available, that type of thing. So there's that. And then you talked about principal storage. Obviously, we would prefer that the vSAN be the solution if that makes sense, but there are other options. Certainly,
you've got some storage flexibility, and when it comes to this right now in this lens, we're looking at a greenfield workload domain, which has certain provisions to it, versus if it were an import to vCenter to become a brownfield workload domain. But I'll say, your choice of switch configuration, like you're saying, right? You've got your NSX VPC deployment. I want you to talk about that, but before I let you say words, I'm gonna say, hey, we support LACP. Like, wait, what? Yeah, I thought you always did. No, VCF did not, but now we do, and that's a big delta from 5.2 and 9 alone. Is that LACP support? Definitely refer to the configuration guide for more details on that. But I know you love talking about VPCs because I make you talk about VPCs all the time.
Yeah, no, VPCs are pretty cool. So that is definitely a new implementation that's available just to segregate traffic and to create those tenants essentially there. But that's something that's relatively new with vCenter and with NSX as well, the ability to deploy those VPCs. So.
And there was a great question asked, what is the minimum node requirement? And I just typed in 4 is the minimum. And I'm not wrong. I'm pretty sure. If I am, I'm happy to be mistaken, but I'm trying to get it.
Yeah. And you're talking about 4 nodes, 4 physical host nodes to support
4 physical host nodes for workload domain. And that's true of VCF running on-prem. That's true of VCF running in cloud. So if you were doing like EVS, that new thing from VMware, the new thing from AWS, also 4 node minimum requirement there.
Yeah, there are some cases where you can get away. It depends on your storage architecture. It's a solid, it depends. But for some very small edge deployments, if you're using NFS storage, for instance, and you want to create a really slim version, obviously you need to make sure that it has the resources, the memory and CPU to support the workloads. But there's some flexibility there.
So this right here, we're going to talk a little bit about the adding. This is that brownfield adding an existing cluster that exists, which was the way you get around to do like iSCSI and stuff like that. But Dean had a great question can a management and workload domain run on the same ESX hosts? And I'm gonna answer it live, right? But I'll also type the answer. I'm just gonna type the answer, but I'll answer it live. While I'm gonna type answers while John, you talk about what it's called when the management and the workload domain run on the same host. What is that called?
Yeah, we used to call that a consolidated deployment, and that would be a deployment where you had the management domain along with workloads running side by side. Obviously, you can do some logical separation there with VPCs, with your storage architecture, that type of thing, if you needed to keep the management and workloads separate. But yeah, that is a possibility you can do. A lot of our customers choose to do that to start off potentially, and then you can add workload domains as your requirements increase, or as your for resources, or if your requirements change for separating compute from one organization or another. Christopher, I didn't mention this before, but one reason why you might have separate workload domains is for cost capability, so that I can tell you exactly how much one workload domain is costing versus another, for instance, and do chargeback for those organizations. But to answer the question at hand, yes, we can certainly create a consolidated. We don't typically use that nomenclature any longer, but you can have that management domain
do, but we
combined with
don't, but we
workloads.
do.
We do, but it's like
Yeah.
my
If
kids
you
would say
said it was
6, 7.
consolidated, like, I got you. I know
I
what you
got
mean.
you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting point on that is I got 8 nodes. Let's say I got 8 nodes. Does that mean I need to do 4 nodes for a management domain and 4 nodes for workload domain? You can. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or I can do an 8-node management domain and still have all those resources running on there. Because that's myth number like 7,000, right? I mean, we cover a lot of pieces here, but one of the top myths I'll hear from people next to you require a vSAN. The other major myth I hear is you won't allow me to run other workloads in my management domain. And the truth is, no, you can run all that stuff consolidated, or hey, I just want to run these additional workloads in that space. Obviously, you want to provision and space certain pieces out in a particular way so you can't have another workload step on something. That's just standard like cluster management, standard stuff within there. But within that domain itself, you're able to do all that stuff. But Chris had an amazing question from the beginning of the session that we'll talk it through here, right? And Chris wants to talk about, can he bring in an existing instance of operation into a greenfield deployment? Brownfield, no question, absolutely no issue. But can he's got a VROPS 818. Can he take that VROPS 818 and have it go and say, hey, let's pull that existing VROPS 818 into my greenfield deployment that I'm using the VCF installer for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked about converging components and leveraging the components that exist. So yeah, that absolutely can happen. So there's 2 things I think, Christopher, we probably ought to address is that, yeah, it can be pulled into a VCF 9 environment. However, if you choose to maybe upgrade over a period of time or in stages, that VCF component needs to be upgraded to 9 in order to support the licensing requirements and things of the so no matter which way you go, I would absolutely recommend upgrading that to 9 and then either converging it or leveraging it until you get to a converged spot. So,
and operationally, would you say it's fair? So I've got this VROPS 818 environment, right? That's running on my infrastructure as it stands right now. And I want a greenfield, stand up new stuff. So I have a brand new management domain, all that jazz, right? One thing I could do is I can greenfield deploy brand new vCenter with, we'll say 4, 8, 16, whatever it is, brand new vSphere 9 hosts, right? So I've got ESX 9, vCenter 9 running over here, which come in trial mode, right? They come in unlicensed until I have an ops 9 instance where we then load our license file into. And if that happens to be in that particular case, we kind of provision and feed it and it's way over there. Does that seem fair to you, John?
yeah, absolutely. That's a fair statement.
So we've got this one here. We're talking about expand. This is where we're importing, right? This is where we take an existing vCenter, and this comes really useful from where I don't want to stand up a brand new workload domain because I have existing vCenters. That's the thing is that this was part of the VMware Broadcom meeting you where you're at. I already have I got a vCenter 8. I got an 801 out in my environment, and I'd love to be able to go pull that into my new VCF 9 environment. Like, yeah. Sweet, go and do that. And I may have some certain configurations. I got iSCSI over there. Yeah, go pull them for iSCSI. I try to delete this from the slide just because we all know vVol is deprecated in 9 and removed in 9.1, right? It's shown up in many slides, right? So vVols, but it's still there, right? We support vVols, but don't do vVols. Do it in that form, but this is how you're able to go and import in existing vCenters that run existing vSphere 8 nodes. So that way they'll be part and parcel in the environment as you get them upgraded to 9 and so forth, right? So that it definitely accounts for a number of different nuanced situations. Hey, I'm running LACP over here. I can't do VCF. No, now I can. I can do VCF 9 with LACP. Just a lot of functionality there. What does that importing experience look like? It kind of looks like this. If I want to import, it's got to be 8.0 U3 and above, right? Check the documentation. It's got to be NSX 4.2 3 and above. So I thought somewhere there was a question about I'm running NSX 4.2.2, I think maybe. And either way, this says 4.2.3. So, and it's very strict about what versions of NSX are supported. So sometimes you got to upgrade. If you upgrade too far, sometimes you have to downgrade. And like we know, NSX is very nuanced in the initial 9.0 release, right? You must use VLCM images. Oh, I'm not doing images. I'm doing baselines or blah, blah, blah. You must use VLCM images, right? And you got the distributed switches. We talk about that. And we talk about the statically assigned. And like I said before, a lot of these things repeat themselves. And the reason they repeat themselves is there's a lot of universal constructs that apply to kind of all the pieces. We talked about the Elm and can't be VxRail managed, right? So whether I'm doing this greenfield, brownfield, import, etc., none of this applies to greenfield, but this applies in that brownfield context. Well, let's talk through some of these upgrade paths, because these are the most common deployment situations. I got vSphere and ops. All right, sweet. I got vSphere and vSAN. Like, all right, well, where's your ops, man? I got vSphere and ops. Like, these are the common use cases we typically see that where people are going to be trying to upgrade, right? And we'll get into some of those upgrade paths. So if I am brownfield, right, I'm existing today, I'm running 8.18.3, right? If I'm not update 18.3, I'm running 8.18.3, right? We're upgrading to 8.18.3. First thing I do, I take the 8.18.3 and I update it to, ops 9. Like, what do I do? Pack file, John? Is that what I'm doing? Because there's no LCM, because that's like the next slide talks about LCM, right? So if I'm running 8.18.3, what do? Download a pack file and then update that thing to ops 9, basically.
Yep.
And then I go and I deploy fleet management. If it's the VCF entitlement, right? It says there. Because if there's for VVF, these two things are true. And then I just don't have, I don't deploy the fleet management because, because fleet management doesn't exist in the VVF world, right? Then I register it, I register fleet management with that. And boom, now I'm running ops 9. Sweet. And from there, I can then deploy automation, ops for networks, ops for logs, identity broker. But it's like, I already have those pieces. Oh, then this slide doesn't apply to you, because that's the other slide, right? But after all that's done, I've got VROPS updated to 9. Now it became VCF operations. Then I launch the installer and I go through these steps to, go through some of these components. This kind of shows you that like visual journey of what it looks like. Upgrade, can convert my VUM to VLCM, upgrade vSphere 9, upgrade vSAN, deploy the installer, download the binaries, so on and so forth, ping-ponging back and forth to the end where at that point we're running a full VCF 9 environment. But if I am, we actually have VLCM, I'm going to take a drink and let's talk about it, John. Talk all about this.
This is our brownfield conversion with VMware ARIA operations and the lifecycle suite, huh? Yeah.
Same thing we just did, but with VRLCM in this case.
Yeah, exactly. So to start there, you can see, like Chris pointed out, in this case, we will apply 8.18. We need patch 2, I believe it is. Oh yeah, there it says in the slide right here.
There you go, man.
There it is. Glad you included that. Yeah, so we're going to upgrade using Lifecycle Manager to the proper version there. And then once we get there, then we can upgrade that to the 9.0 version. If there's a, oh, I see you have it. It's just a VCF entitlement at that point there. Okay. Yep. Okay.
That's the key part there is this is the same as the last one where it was just ops, but including LCM, right? LCM gets, including VRLCM or Argus Suite Lifecycle Manager, because it's all those terms. Because there's LCM, VLCM, right? There's the different components of it, but it's the exact same stuff. Then you don't use VLCM to update the stuff like you would in a VRLCM world today. You have ops going to update the stuff. Hey, I'm running ARIA automation 8.18. Okay, cool. We're going to update that to VCF automation 9.0. Hey, I'm running Verni 6.4. Oh, sweet. We're going to update that to VCF operations for networks 9. Hey, I'm running logs. Oh, you got to deploy logs fresh, right? Wait, you said that before. Yep. Yes, we did. And same kind of stuff, right? And same journey we just saw with that kind of ping-ponging throughout. This one's a little different. This is vSphere only. I'm just got vCenter and ESX. How do I get, how do I get to VCF, right? We upgrade your so this is one of the rare ones where we actually start by taking what you're running and you upgrade to vCenter 9. It's interesting that it does it that way, but hey, I don't make the slides. I just kind of follow our guidance on it. Because you need that to become that point where the gets converted to a management domain. And the only way to convert that part when you're in that construct is to have that one already be 9 at that point, right? And then you deploy each of the, you enter these pieces, you enter the information what it's going to be, it's going to inject, and then boom, suddenly all that stuff is deployed. And then you can deploy the extra pieces on top of it. So it's kind of an interesting, it's almost like a brownfield greenfield, right? It's naked vSphere becomes, naked vSphere non-VCF becomes almost VCFized and then deploys those operations kind of in reverse. So it's an interesting approach if you happen to be a truly naked vSphere environment without any ops, right? And again, similar kind of journey that we saw is a kind of like ping pong across with those steps. If you are running VCF today, hey, I'm running VCF 5 too. Okay, sweet. Follow, like, these are the same steps you just showed me before. I'm like, yep. It's that easy. Like, that's the best part is brownfield, brownfield non-VCF, brownfield VCF. Pretty straightforward, really easy steps and guidance to follow through, right? Similar kind of like ding, 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 and then you kind of pop across to it. What if I were VCF that was RA ops only? I'd be like, I don't feel like, I mean, you had a VCF entitlement, but you weren't VCF, right? But again, it's the same type of approach. I kind of treat it the same way, right? It's that same kind of journey. I always find this interesting where it's like, oh, and you've got 818, like, I'm RA ops only, man. But okay, sure. But it's the same operational steps as we kind of walk through it, right? And same outcome. All right. We've got a few minutes here. These are some of the biggest, most important pieces around the complexities that go into it, some of the challenges. I throw this one top, front, and center. This applies to every situation, greenfield, brownfield, whatever it is. Everything moves to keyless or file-based license activation, which has 90 days instead of the old 45 days, or like 45 or 60-day trial. Everything moves to keyless 90 days, right? So the first thing you do, the step one of readiness, does my hardware support VCF 9? Do I have sufficient CPU, memory, IP storage, right? Do I have all the sufficient stuff? I got to choose simple HA, right? I got to make those decisions, and I choose like what kind of VCF fleet deployment design I want to have. And there's a deployment guide that has, I'm going to do the single site or multi-site or, multi-site or multi-different nodes or cross-site, regional geographical, there's all that stuff inside the architectural guide, right? And I start to make those decisions, right? Because I like this one. We start early, we assess early, we identify what are our known issues, right? Which we're going to cover over the next couple slides. Then we design, hey, what does the target infrastructure look like? Is it brownfield? Is it greenfield? Is it supported? Right? We identify the pathway. The pathway of least resistance is kind of the way I would look at it. But we kind of identify that path. We figure out what the path and scope is. We kind of went through each of those things. And then we build our run book. Sometimes that upgrade, path run book is like update ops to 9, right? It might be something so simple. Sometimes it might be a little more nuanced, a little more, elements that go into it. So I like this as that step one of, is my hardware compatible, right? We're just revisiting that. Am I doing something that's deprecated or removed today? Elm, vVols, host profiles, VUM? Like, what am I situation I have to deal with at that point, right? Am I doing LACP? Oh, then if I am doing LACP, I have to figure out, is it supported in the nuance I'm going to do, because there is that greenfield versus brownfield. Am I doing Cisco VMM? That's not supported in this case. Do I have the storage set up? Oh, I'm NFS v4.1. Ooh, principle, man, it's not on the checkbox technically, right? So you got to look at like the different nuance on how you actually go and do those pieces as far as what your storage configuration is. Remember, storage does not equal vSAN, but you definitely have to have one of those principal supported storage configurations, of which, who is it? There's a really good article that came out recently of some extra elements of it, right? Check my software versions. Check if I have any third-party solutions that are not supported for 9 or 8. In some cases, I've faced that, right? And then just check, hey, check all the different operations, order of orientation stuff inside the environment. run our health checks. John took us through actually going through making sure our stuff passes it, review what we're going to do, and then go through our steps. Hey, how do we go about accomplishing this? How do I go from VUM to VLCM? How do I go from Elm to VCF SSO and so forth, right? As we kind of feed into, these are some of those key complexities. Make sure you're running at least 8.0 update 1, right? We say 8.0 update 3, and it's 8.0 U3 update 1. I think it's again, refer to the documentation. Make sure hardware meets those requirements. Make sure you don't have any workflows, API calls, different stuff like that. If you're running less than VCF 5, you got to get yourself to a supported version of 5. There's where those API calls are kind of coming in, right? This talks a little bit about the Elm, right? The enhanced link mode, how it's, you need to be moved off of that in there. If I'm running multiple, so if you're in a base environment, single VCF instance or single vSphere instance, or, like general simple sites and stuff like that, most of this is going to be pretty straightforward. But if you're a highly complexified, super detailed environment, I've got 16 geographic locations in a very special, cross-site, replication configuration using SRM, and I'll like, whew, okay, that is, take your time. Make sure you're going through each of the steps, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. And if you have any VxRail in there, contact your Dell rep, right? Get the specific details on that, because there's special nuance specifically focused on that, right? Number of things are deprecated. Now you've got this, you can go back to the video and take a look at some of these things that were deprecated and which items are actually directly removed inside here. And I kind of like this one just because it kind of shows me, hey, Elm is deprecated. Yeah. And like these things migrated to that. Hey, host profiles are deprecated. Yeah. They become vSphere config profiles. Or SDC manager, what happened to you? Oh, you're now the ops fleet manager. I just like that way of that showing me it was this, now it is this. That kind of that terminology. What happened to VUM? VUM's gone. Moved to VLCM with images, just like different elements of it kind of talking about each of those pieces. Cloud Builder's gone. Oh my God. Now VCF installer. Oh, okay, sweet. So that's what's really nice about these kind of slides as they are. I got some of these key takeaways, and we're going to try to answer as many questions on the Q&A as we possibly can, right? But these are some of the key ones here. Just note for these things. Most important, if you are doing baselines, you must switch to images, right? That is the universal construct, and all these other pieces here, right? NSX must be deployed, but you don't need to change your networking. EDP gives you a good reason to change your networking, but you're not forced to do any of those things, right? If I'm an existing environment, check each of these boxes as they refer to, and obviously refer to the documentation, right? This little fun one here, if I'm doing an existing 5.2, let's say up to here, account for some of these pieces. Here's my thank you slide. I'm going to go try to hit as many questions in the Q&A as I possibly can. You too, John, if there's ones that jump out you want to talk about. Robert said, does VCF Ops 9 run on vCenter 8, or is VCF 9 required? It can run on 8. However, you'll want to get it to 9, but you initially and provisionally can deploy it on 8, and then obviously you'll get it to 9, because while Ops can run on 8, and I've got an article in my Architect's Edge newsletter. Hey, that's right there. You can scan that QR code. I've got an article that walks through which pieces are supported. Fleet Manager requires 9. Automation requires 9. SDDC Manager 9 can run on 8 technically. So yeah, I've got a little, matrix that kind of covers out some of the different nuance on that. Let's see, other ones that you want to jump out and grab there, John. I'll just hit the answer live.
Yeah, I think that one was a pretty popular one around, can I run VCF Ops in an 8, X environment? No, I think you hit that one. Definitely run it. I mean, it can run, it's a VM. But as far as importing or converging things into a VCF 9 environment, that's when you need to start getting the components up to a 9 version.
Richard had a great question. Must I put my VCF ops in the management domain, or can I leave it in an existing cluster? And yes, at least definitely the main one, right? The most important one. But there's some interesting federation situations that we don't have the time to talk about today around ops federation. But I would always default to my ops, my VCF ops is inside my management domain, and you can always like hit us up on like different nuance of ways we can try to do it differently, if that makes sense.
Yep.
For VCF 9, what are the versions of ESX, vCenter, and NSX required? 999, right? If we're going to be for VCF 9, yes, that is 999 all day.
Yep.
Any last questions before VMUG kicks me out? VMUG team, Erica.
Let's see. What were slides 23 and 24, Christopher? Do we have that available?
Oh,
that was the
not easily to jump to it, but
okay.
this is
All
recorded,
right.
so you can go and pull it up from the recording.
Very good point. Keyless licensing in an air gap environment. Let's answer that, and then we'll leave. So we can get pulled off the stage.
Yeah, do it,
You
man.
mentioned that. Yeah, you mentioned that one. So in an air gapped environment, we do have the ability to register a VCF ops instance with the Broadcom support portal, and then you will download a license file that's encrypted and import that into the VCF ops instance. And that's great for a dark site or something that doesn't have direct access to the Broadcom
you
portal.
refer to that as disconnected mode.
Disconnected mode. That's right.
Yeah.
You have an
And
online or disconnected mode.
I have an article that scan this QR code. I've got an article that actually talks through that and what's actually in the license file. So you can go and pull that from the Architect's Edge as well. These are all great questions. I know Erica's going to kill me here if I don't shut up, but you guys have been amazing. We appreciate you guys all being here and asking so many amazing questions. Definitely make sure to join us next week for part 3 when we go to Unleashing the Power of Operations and Lifecycle. And definitely at the end of the month for our expert roundtable as well. And my webinar next month, which says, oh my God, so amazing.
That's good. I'll stop going on. Is there a way to grab these questions and we can respond offline? Because there's some really good ones there, Erica.
I was just about to say, we will be exporting the Q&A and the chat. So we'll make sure the speakers, John and Christopher, have them to answer either to you all personally or in the future webinars we have. But don't worry, those are being saved as well as the chat. So feel free to ask away. But
you guys have been amazing. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I do think this might have won the award for most questions that we've gotten.
And anything we got wrong, they probably changed something on us. So that happens. We're constantly getting updates on changes. I mean, 2 months ago, like VxRail, not supported. And then it became supported. I got an article on that. You can go read the details on that one as well.
Yeah, this is to the best of my ability as well. So
Eric's been amazing.
You want to kick
my
back?
God.
Thanks, Eric.
Appreciate 300 questions.
It felt like
backbone.
Yeah, I'm loving it.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen then. Okay, hopefully everyone can see it. So thank you everyone for joining. This session was recorded as well as the chat and the Q&A. So we will make sure to put that in you'll get a wrap-up email as well as it'll live on myvmug.com. There will be a survey once this webcast ends. It'll automatically take you to it. It's just a couple questions. It really does help us inform speakers for next time, what kind of content to bring you in the future. And we really do take a look at that and to provide fresh, relevant content. And then you can use the code community for 10% off of a 1-year Advantage membership. The Advantage program, I know we talked about it a little bit in the Q&A, but it is our paid VMUG membership. We have to be a VMUGger, it's completely free, but Advantage is a paid membership. And this is where we can bring you better content and better programming and things like license keys for VCF 9 if you're certified. So this has a little bit of some differences in the free program versus the paid membership for Advantage. And as I said before, if you pass a VCF 9 certification, you really should just join Advantage. I'd recommend joining it before because then you get half off your certification, but it brings you all of the extra. So the vDefend and Avi Load Balancer, as well as those cores and license keys to be able to run VCF 9 on a home lab. So there's just some more information on that, and it should have a little QR code there if you want to get more on Advantage, or you can email advantage@vmug.com and learn more. And I think that's it. So thank you so much for you all's time. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.